are about to experience, Jackson Snyder presents. Direct from the Vero Essene Yahad, a Hebrew Nation radio original program. JSP is a variety show seeking out Jewish and Christian origins, religion, theology and history, and doing so in a fashion that is both educational and entertaining. Welcome to Jackson Snyder Presents.
Okay, friends, you've got Brother Schruumkoff tonight with his mouth full of French burnt peanut, and I'm here to tell you tonight, let's talk about it, we have eschatology. These men are talking about ruling and reigning in a messianic millennium. Wonderful subject. And as I listened, I heard some very great ideas about what it's like up yonder, you know. And surprisingly enough, what I heard is pretty much what I believe, but spoken of in wonderful language. So tonight on Let's Talk About It, the subject is eschatology, and I hope you enjoy it. Yahweh be with you, my friend, and don't go with the devil tomorrow. Professor Smith, I just want to ask you, as you talk about that passage in the letter of James, about the just one, do you ever see the original quotation from the prophets, like Isaiah, for instance?
I never made the connection in Isaiah where it talks about you have, where it talks about the just being the just man. You killed the just man. It's believed that Isaiah was prophesying well ahead of time. James the just martyrdom, and then Jude. Now I always thought that the quotation in Jude referenced James the just, because it comes right out and says, you have killed the just, and he doth not resist you, the just man, and he does not resist you. That's in the book of Jude. I always thought, okay, that might very well refer to James the just, but there's one in Isaiah too. That was the part I didn't realize. I've learned quite a few things in that book. I'm enjoying it quite a bit. You don't have to. Now, I think this is written by Eusebius, so it's got a lot of nuggets in there. It's not like just a rehashed regurgitation of these so-called modern theologians trying to write a thick book. That it's like you're wading through a bunch of stuff just to get to a good thing.
Yeah, the first time I read that, and then the first time I read the recognitions and the homilies, I literally sat there, I think, in a mild state of shock, because I was like, how could this be? What is this? But then I think if you're able to look past the fact that it's not in our 66 book canon, and we realize that, things have been removed, and the way, to me, some of the most important writings are those early church father writings, because I can't help but think that these guys, you have, at some point, I think you have to have faith. I mean, anybody could sit there and rationalize and say, well, it's been 2,000 years, this could have been redacted, it could have been added, and that's true, but I think at some point you just gotta kind of just say, okay, Father, I believe that you want us to know these things. And so I've just gotten to the point that there are some writings that are extra biblical that I treat like, I value the Nazarene Acts more than I actually do the book of Acts in my Bible. Although I do think the book of Acts is legitimate and I think it is accurate, but I think it's a record of Paul's ministry rather than Peter's. And I've come up on the other side of my Paul issues. I've studied it out and prayed it out enough, and I kind of have my own. I guess not my own, but I'm settled on Paul now. I'm comfortable with him. That being said, I think that Paul, I can't help but think about, I think of the parable of the talents, how Yahshua gave, the three people their talents, the same ones, and then left, and then they came back and rewarded the ones that did the work, and the ones that didn't do as much maybe, or, less than the guy that just hid his stuff, he just took his and gave it to the guy that had everything. So, but I was thinking about that, and I was like, what a picture of, I guess, to lack of a better term, would be Christianity. Because, Yahshua says that for if people don't do Torah and teach others not to do it, he doesn't say you're going to be damned to hell or you're going to be thrown out. He says you're going to be least in the kingdom.
Yeah,
so,
you'll be considered less. Yeah, I remember that.
So I started thinking about that, and I thought, well, what if he's talking about the same thing Paul talks about in Hebrews when he talks about moving on to, you can't sit there and drink milk forever. When you become an adult, you have to eat meat at some point. So I was thinking about that. Oh, I got to admit, Finney, sorry, Finney. But so maybe what he's talking about is, for instance, the Gentiles, like, for instance, all of our Christianity type people, a lot of those people, they believe in the Messiah. They may not know his name, but they believe in him. They believe in his character and who he was. And you know what? They don't keep Shabbat. They don't keep Torah. They do keep Torah. I think they keep it without even maybe realizing what they're really keeping, because they don't really read the Torah. I don't think so much. So, but they will have, in my opinion anyway, on Judgment Day, hopefully anyway, rewards. They just might not be the extent of the rewards of somebody that is set apart and living righteously and keeping Shabbat and all that kind of stuff. Yes, obviously that person, I think, will get a quote unquote greater reward, but that doesn't mean that the other guy will stand in complete judgment and have nothing. To me, that doesn't line with the teaching of Scripture. And like when Paul says, I press on towards the might, towards the high calling of Jesus Christ, and I'm running to attain the prize. Not that I've already attained it, he said, but I press on towards that mark, like an arrow shooting at the Torah, hitting the mark, So
Right,
with Paul,
right.
I think Paul gets that. I think that's exactly what Yahshua was talking about when he was talking about, listen, if you walk your life according to Torah and you do these good things, then yes, you will be rewarded. Well, you're not supposed to do it for a reward. I disagree with that. If we weren't supposed to, we should be doing things that make ourselves well-pleasing to our Father. And the way that he's going to show, well done, my good and faithful servant, is he's going to give us our eternal rewards based on our service. So I don't think there's a problem with saying, yes, of course I want to be well-pleasing to the Father because I want a blessed eternity with them. And I don't necessarily think there's a problem with that.
Right. Yeah, we do serve an Elohim of grace, and there's going to be a lot of people that are going to get in the gate, but the rewards are going to be a different story. This is one that sort of ties into, at least how I personally believe, that there are actually 3 stations in the kingdom. There's the children of Elohim, and then there's going to be the bride of Messiah, and within the bride of Messiah is those who attain, like Paul attained, a crown, or he said, no, I follow after that, may attain that which is apprehended for me. I think he's referring to a crown. And there's another place he mentions that. And so there's going to be priests and kings of the Most High that are in the millennial kingdom that are going to be appointed by Yahshua to take charge of certain areas of the earth for the millennial reign, like a governor of sorts. And so you've got the children of God. They're all children of God. If you get into the kingdom, you're children of God, you're not a children of Satan. So you've got those, and then
like he still gets let out. At the end of the 1,000 years, he gets let back out. How are we all at that point? You're saying so before he gets let out for the final testing, that we're all children of Elohim that can't.
Well, I'm talking about what I'm talking about is the millennial reign.
Yeah.
And then
after the millennial reign, when Hasatan gets let back out.
Right, to deceive the nations once more. That's right.
So if we're all children of Elohim by that point in time, how could we be deceived?
Well, there's going to be a lot.
Why would he let us be deceived?
What I'm saying is that the children of Elohim will be in glorified bodies, but there's going to be natural people on the earth. The people in the glorified bodies, are going to be ruling and reigning with Messiah. And there'll be various things that the Messiah will give them to do in the kingdom, in my understanding of Scripture. But there's still going to be natural people that make it into the millennial reign. So they're going to be given a choice. It's going to be a new dispensation. They're going to be given a choice to serve the King in Zion, and for a long time they will, because the devil has been locked up. He can't tempt them anymore. But he's going to be released, it says in Revelation, toward the end of the millennial reign, to go around once more and deceive the nations. I think it's referring to those who are the natural descendants who have come in to the millennial reign, had children, so on and so forth. So that's how I look at those scriptures and put them together.
I would agree with that. I think that when Yahshua comes and institutes the kingdom, I think that the redeemed, both dead and alive, will be just like Paul talks about, put into the kingdom, but then I think we'll go to work. And I think that the rest of the nations that were not involved with the land of promise, which is what I believe prophecy is all about, either the nations in that land, that geographical amount of land, and according to its dimensions, or nations that throw into either for or against his people within that land. And I think that there's going to be millions, if not billions, I think, well, probably not billions, but at least millions of people outside of the land that aren't part of the Antichrist armies, that are just general Joes like you and I, or whatever, not like you and I, but just regular people who are in various countries of the world that aren't in the armies or anything like that, citizens, so to speak, that are unredeemed. And there's going to be a new king of the earth, and it's going to be Yahshua. And I think those people are going to have to be redeemed just like everybody else is redeemed, and I agree. I think they'll have babies and there'll be people. I mean, because I don't think that just because Satan is bound, in my opinion anyway, that does not remove man's inner natural fleshly way that we were born into the world and the struggles that we have every day. I think that people have to be redeemed, born again from that. So I think that during that millennial reign, it'll just continue. And I think the focus within the land, I think within the kingdom, is going to be taken care of by Yahshua. I think the work that his people will have to do throughout the world are going to be outside of that land. I think we're going to essentially be missionaries and teachers and helpers and, food givers and miracle workers and healers and all that kind of stuff. I think we're going to be doing that, and we're going to be doing it, testifying that Yahshua is the Messiah. And as crazy as it seems to believe, but there will still be people that will not believe or will be hard-hearted and just won't. I mean, look at Pharaoh and a lot of those people, the stuff they saw with their own eyes, and they still were hard-hearted. And, so Yahweh hardened their hearts even more, or turned them over to a hard heart, even some people say. But so that's what I think. And I think when Satan gets released for the end of that 1,000 years, there's going to be millions and millions of people throughout the world that although they may come and keep the Feast of Tabernacles, like it says in Zechariah 14, and so they can have rain on their land and they could survive. That doesn't mean that they're necessarily entering the kingdom. It means that they're being obedient in the little, so to speak. So I could very easily see how Satan could come out of there and be able to deceive. And obviously he does it because there's a massive army that surrounds the land at the end, Jerusalem, and then Yahweh destroys them. So, I get it. To me, there's not really a conflict, I guess, or at least I don't see one.
I can kind of see one in regards to the last testing and what you all are saying about being the least in the kingdom. Is it possible that when it says that, those that taught against Torah, because I have a really hard time thinking that those who actually teach against Torah, are going to have another opportunity. Is it possible that it's just talk amongst those that did get in about those that didn't get in, that are the least, that didn't teach Torah?
That's an interesting thought.
Because that's the way that I've heard that described in such a way that actually makes sense to me. That's because it kind of goes against the whole book that those that teach against Torah are going to get into the kingdom. Just like those that, that prophesied against him didn't get into the land. It's clearly, he's not really ever playing around with people that are against him.
I think he probably judges people on their knowledge too, though.
Boy, I don't know. If you're teaching against Torah, whether you know what you're doing or not, like if you're going to have a hard time, I just don't see him as somebody that's going to be all that willing to forgive such things.
What were you saying, Shawn? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, brother, that's fine. No, yeah, I think that. Hold on a second. As far as Torah goes, I don't necessarily, I guess, see people that are like just flat out against Torah. I don't see how you could be like that and still love the Messiah, since he doesn't teach anything but the Torah, because he is basically the Torah made flesh. So, but thinking about that, I was like, well, the Christians, I'll just use the Baptist because that's the only example I'm really super familiar with anymore. But a good Baptist, a guy that goes to church every Sunday, there's nothing wrong with going to church on Sunday. The first century believers, disciples did it. They kept Sabbath, but they also had broke bread on Sunday and all that. Okay, so I think about that. And yeah, they may not keep Sabbath, or they actually think they are keeping Sabbath. They just don't recognize Saturday. They think it's been changed to Sunday. So I started thinking about that, and a good Christian, a good Bible-believing fundamental Christian, keeps probably over 80% of the Torah anyway, I think. just by doing the fruits of the Spirit in Galatians say, or in the stuff that Paul says in Romans, even that's all Torah anyway, what he says. So I think that a lot of them keep a good chunk of the Torah in spite of them saying, Torah's been nailed to the cross. Well, you do realize that you still keep it, a lot of it, and so those people may not be living inside of the land, but they certainly are going to be at least be able to enter once a year to live in booths for tabernacles, because it says in Zechariah that they will keep the Feast of Tabernacles or they'll get cursed. There'll be no rain and they'll get the rotting eyeball plague and all that stuff it talks about. So yeah, I think that they will be able to come up to the kingdom and see the king and keep the Feast of Tabernacles.
Those aren't people teaching against Torah though either. Those are people that are just not necessarily had their eyes opened by the Father, which I agree with you. They'll be part of the second resurrection, which will there ensure that they have the opportunity to hear the truth from his appointed kings and priests, which should in all entails be us, the believers in this life, part of the first resurrection that are brought to be the kings and priests. But those are not necessarily the guys you see Sunday with millions of followers that are blatantly and openly teaching against Torah. Where it said, I think I'll have to read that verse again, but I don't think that Paul is saying, is talking about the people that you're talking about. I think he's talking about the mega church pastors and those that are openly teaching against Torah. I don't know how much of a chance that they're going to have, in that to be part of that second resurrection.
Yeah, well, he does judge us on the knowledge we have, and surely they've run into people that have tried to show them the truth. I mean, I've read about a pastor that actually said to a guy who was trying to show him about the Sabbath, he says, I know it's true. But the people couldn't handle it. They would leave the church. So he chooses the tithe money over the truth. I think there might be more harsh judgment for such an individual. But you think about all the people that lived in the church all through the ages, and they were doing Sunday. They were very rarely did you even run into someone like us, because basically we were burned at the stake if they found people like us. Or we were drawn and quartered.
All those that are aborted too in this country, they all got to have a change.
Yeah.
So I think there's going to be a lot of that too, that we don't even see those people. millions of people in this country. 3,000 people a day are murdered without ever giving a shot at life at all. For a just Elohim, they're all going to have a fair shake.
Right.
I think we might be. I think that we might. At least I hope so. On Judgment Day, judgment is probably going to be so unlike we're thinking, anyways. Because I think that we think like in matters of extreme. However, I believe that Yahweh probably, praise him that he's the one that actually is in charge of judging people's hearts and their intents and all that, because somebody, you and I may think, just out of our own thoughts, Yahweh may totally see different things because he can see the heart. We can't, so who knows about judgment? I mean, Jackson believes that people that don't receive the Messiah, everybody still has to stand in judgment and receive what you've done, both good and bad. How true that is, I don't know, but I think that judgment is going to be something different than what we think it is, probably, anyways.
A little story about judgment. So the Orthodox community tends to think that when you speak Lashon Hara, that you take on that person's sin and they get credit for all your mitzvot. It's just kind of interesting way to think about it. So when you speak ill of somebody, you take on all of their sin.
Wow, that is interesting.
And that they get credit, or that the one that's being talked about gets the mitzvah of the one committing the Lashon Hara. So you would sympathetically change places in judgment for the good and bad. The person that stand for you for all the bad you've done, and you get credit for all the good that they've done. So I don't know if there's any validity. I don't think there's any validity to it scriptural wise, but it was very interesting when I heard it. That's very interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting. That's very interesting.
They take that very seriously, a lot more seriously than we do.
Well, because if you think of people, like just from examples in the scriptures, like the Pharisees, for instance, a lot of them have probably appeared very righteous and everything. And if we get someone like that, like for instance, some of our churches, and I don't mean the mega pastors, the guys that are after money and, all them guys. I'm talking about like the little small town fundamental guys or whatever, even though, some of them may appear very righteous and people may think, oh man, but inward, maybe they're not so much, but Yahweh can see the heart where we can't. So there's probably going to be people, and Yahweh forbid not us, but I'm sure that there's going to be people that whom we may have thought were very righteous and did things, maybe they didn't, you know, maybe deep down they weren't, you know, and I think that's what the whole righteous weighing is going to be, you know.
I'm thankful it's not my job.
Amen, brother. Hey, Brother Smith, I wanted to ask you a question. Last week when I was speaking about the first, Irenaeus and, Papias and all those guys, what do you guys think about their writings? Like Clement, for instance, the recognitions and all that. Do you believe that what they put forth in their letters that they say they've received from like John the Apostle himself, for instance, or something, or Peter? Do you believe that we have an accurate representation of the information that was given to them by those disciples?
You mean as far as what was reported as what the original disciples said and did, or do you mean their own ideas about Scripture?
Well, like for instance, Papias says that, I learned from the mouth of the Apostle John himself that Yahshua will come back, and reign on this earth for 1,000 years. So do we believe that, or, do people believe that is exactly what he said, and that is a fair and a true representation of true doctrine? Like for instance, can we bank on that?
Well, I think we have to compare. I would never put these successor disciples, their writings, on the level of thus saith Yahweh in Scripture and various particular prophets that we know are established that were speaking by the Spirit of Elohim. But that's not to say that they are not still in a level of inspiration. But we have to. I think we should be careful to compare what they say with what established prophets and apostles said. So I guess I can answer that as carefully as I can. I think that the example you used is perfectly legitimate because you see that in other places in Scripture. Therefore, the likelihood that he wrote that because he literally heard that from John the Apostle is very high. So that's the best I could say about that. It would have to be on a case-by-case basis because there's certain things that Augustine says that I think are incorrect. And I give deference to his great learning, but they're incorrect. There's certain things that don't match up. Some of it, I think, the further along these church fathers get, the closer to the Catholic Church, Council of Nicaea and the Council of Laodicea, the more you begin to see corruption enter in. A corruption which is because of the what's the term? The Zeitgeist of the age, if I can use a German term, Zeitgeist, meaning the prevailing wind of the age was such that it was virulently anti-Jew, and therefore by extension, virulently or more so virulently becoming anti-Torah, anti-Sabbath, anti-anything that makes it look like a Jew. They were desperately these later church fathers were desperately trying to extricate themselves from the bad cloud of the practices of Jews because they had made themselves quite a stench in the courts of these Roman emperors. So there was a confluence of events, I think, that occurred that led to the Council of Nicaea. But still, I think it fulfills Paul's words when he said that after his passing, grievous wolves would come in, not sparing flock, and then men of perverse mind would arise from within. I think he's looking down the generation as you see the church did away with more and more of the Torah, and became sort of an amalgamation between a faith in Messiah, but paganism too, which is the situation that we end up today with a lot of the churches in terms of their traditional standpoint, their traditions. That's the best way I can answer that.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I think this is the thing with me, is that anything after about 300 AD, say, I really don't like to read much of those church fathers' writings, just because I agree with you. I think once Rome became Holy Roman, the Holy Roman, like the Roman Catholic Church became more spiritual, there's no doubt that Semitism and twistings of scriptures to get things Romanized, I definitely see that. But those first believers, Irenaeus and Clement and Barnabas, those guys, to me, those guys were all, if you read their writings, they're in line with the Didache and things like that.
You may contact us at Jackson Snyder Presents at this email address, veroyahad@gmail.com. That is VEROYAHAD@gmail.com. And let me remind you, you are listening to Jackson Snyder Presents with your host tonight, Bogdan G. Schruumkoff. Thank you for listening. We'll be right back. Jackson Snyder Present is back. Join us now for more of this interesting discussion.
So I started thinking about that, and the really early church fathers, before all the councils and stuff, they all are very, very consistent about, and I'm speaking mainly of end times, but some of them have wrote huge volumes on end times, and they all match with what they say as far as what's going to happen. They all believe, none of them believe that 70 AD was the end, was the day of the Lord. They believe that it was a judgment, but in the future, they all say there's an Antichrist. He's coming from the tribe of Benjamin, and they talk about a 7-year tribulation. They talk about a rebuilt temple, and the abomination that Yahshua spoke of is going to happen again. They basically believe, kind of as we've all been kind of grown up through mainstream Christianity, that type of an end time scenario type interpretation of it. They match it. They agree. So I started thinking about that. I thought, well, so what does that mean? Well, it means to me that either the corruption of the end times theology started very, very early, like earlier than we even anticipated, or I think that personally, I'm trying to be careful not to go to the far right, so to speak. I don't want to be so Torah focused and everything that I become kind of like some of the hostile messianic type guys, you know what I mean? And that because I think that there's something to be said. There's many wonderful Christian scholars, and you and I, we all know that some of their doctrines are off, and they're off because they don't read the Dead Sea Scrolls, and they don't understand about the first century Essenes. They just see the Pharisees and Sadducees, and they don't even know anything about the recognitions or anything like that. But once you read those things and you get Jubilees and all the Dead Sea Scrolls, put them back in, read Enoch, and you start connecting the dots through these things, to me, if we have writings from people that learned from the mouth of Peter himself or John himself, we know that they were spirit-filled, learned everything they knew. They learned from the mouth of Yahshua himself. So, the first century fathers to me their writings are super, super important, because not only do their doctrines match kind of what many of us believe anyway, but they also illuminate and further give weight to proper interpretations. That we kind of was, well, like for instance, Daniel, a lot of people teach, well, Daniel, it was talking about Antiochus Epiphanes, and then it was, talking about Rome, the destruction of Rome, or Jerusalem by Rome in AD 70. Well, according to the church fathers who are writing 100 years after AD 70, they say that all of this stuff is still future, and it's going to lay out exactly as we have all talked about for the end times. So I have to think, are they right or not? Because if they're not right, and if the day of the Lord happened in 70 AD, and then that's it, now we're just waiting for Yahshua to come, and whenever he's going to come into the 6th day and set up the kingdom, that is a possible interpretation. But the problem I have with that is that it flies in the face of all of the writings of the first century fathers. And a lot of them even teach pre-trib, or at least mid-trib rapture, even they teach that, but those doctrines can also be found in our scriptures, depending how you interpret them. Because you have the pre-tribs guys who say, no, these verses say that we're not appointed to wrath. Then you get the mid-trib guys, no, it happens before the start of the Great Tribulation. Because Egypt had to endure the first 4 plagues, and then the last 6 was only on Egypt, and it's the same kind of a thing. And the post-trib guys, oh, no, you have to go through it as refinement, and he comes at the end. But the common thread is that he comes, first of all, but the first century guys are on board with those thoughts. I mean, they're not, you could argue, I guess, from them pre-trib or mid-trib, or you can even take some of their interpretations as being post-trib, I guess you could. But it was amazing to me when I sat back and read them, and I thought, wow, here I thought that I had it completely wrong. But according to their writings, no, we don't really have it wrong. The only thing that we've really done is Christianity has removed the Torah, and which is a huge thing. We know it's a massively huge thing. But again, Yahweh judges us by our deeds. And, besides themselves, they still keep a lot of the Torah just by walking in their Christian faith and being kind and having the fruits of the Spirit, like Paul says, and who knows how Yahweh's going to judge that, I mean, how does he even judge our Torah observance? I mean, what if we do good works, but we do it begrudgingly because we're tired, we don't really feel like it, but we know we should? Well, is there a reward for that? I don't know, but he does, so to me, that was really fascinating. And the first century fathers are super, super fascinating because according to their own testimony, they say they learned from the 12 disciples who learned right from. You can't really get a better pedigree than that, I wouldn't think. So these are the kind of things that have been like looping through my mind lately, and I've just found so much value out of like the recognitions and out of some of these first century church fathers. It's just been amazing to me,
Yeah. Now there are some teachers out there that suggest that this futures viewpoint didn't come about until much later. But when I discovered that, I was quite encouraged myself because I still believe that there's going to be an ultimate manifestation yet to come before Messiah returns. And so this is what this picture they seem to be painting. Daniel 2 seems to suggest that this great stone that comes from heaven, who I believe to be Yahshua, because he's the cornerstone. He's the most important stone. But it comes from heaven and it strikes the feet of this image that Daniel sees in the vision, relates to King Nebuchadnezzar. And it says it grows and fills the earth. The idea is that it's slowly growing and filling the earth. So the kingdom after Messiah comes, it's like what it says in one of the prophecies. It says the Torah shall go forth from Zion, and the word of Yah. Let me see if I can where that's at, but that's shall go forth from Zion. Okay, Micah. There we go. That's in Micah. Micah chapter 4. But at the end of days, the mountain of Yahweh's house will be established as chief of the mountains and will be raised above the hills. People will flow up to it. Then many nations will go and say, come, let us go up to the mountain of Yahweh, to the house of the Elohim of Yaakov. Then he will direct us in his ways, and we will walk in his paths. For the Torah will go forth from Zion. In other words, he's going to be teaching these people Torah. They're going to be going back to wherever they're from. And the word of the master from Jerusalem, he will judge between many peoples and decide for mighty nations far off. They will beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning shears. And nation will not lift up sword against nation, nor will they learn war again. Now, this is clearly a millennial passage. Each man will sit under his vine and under his fig tree with no one causing terror. For the mouth of the master of Zepha'ot, Yahuwah Zepha'ot, has spoken. So all the peoples will walk each in the name of his God. So we ourselves will walk in the name of Yahweh Elohinu forever and ever. So I believe that this image of Nebuchadnezzar, this statue that he saw and Daniel interpreted and saw, the stone is talking about this here. This picture here, the stone is growing and filling the earth. And I believe that we may be given the task, like I say, of those who attain that third level and maybe even the second level, governors. It's similar to what Messiah said in this other passage here. This is in
wrong book. I've been reading a lot of Micah recently, more so chapter 6, but in the start of chapter 6, it talks about mountains as well.
Yeah. Now, there's a connection here with what I think is going to happen to the believers who make it in the first resurrection. They're counted worthy to be found in the first resurrection. And so this is in Luke chapter 19. While the people were listening to this, Yahshua proceeded to tell them a parable because he was near Jerusalem, and they thought the kingdom of Elohim would appear imminently. So he said, a man of noble birth went to a distant country to lay claim to his kingship and then returned. Beforehand, he called 10 of his servants and gave them 10 minas. Conduct business with this until I return, he said. But his subjects hated him and sent a delegation after him, saying, we do not want this man to rule over us. When he returned from procuring his kingship, he summoned the servants to whom he had given the money to find out what each had earned. The first servant came forward and said, Master, your mina has produced 10 more minas. His master replied, Well done, good servant, because you have been faithful in a very small matter, you shall have authority over 10 cities. Okay, so that's the millennial reign right there. That's those of us who are counted worthy to be found in the first resurrection, who perhaps attain unto, as I understand it, the bride, or even the priests and kings of the Most High, take charge over 10 cities. The second came and said, Master, your mina has made 5 minas. And to this one he said, You shall have authority over 5 minas. The last guy, apparently, he hid it away. He didn't do anything with the master's wealth that he had given him. I think that refers to their gifts and abilities, their whatever they're doing for the kingdom. This guy got himself in trouble. And, he takes that even away from the guy that had 1, gives it to the one who has 10. And he makes this cryptic statement in verse 26. He replied, I tell you that everyone who has been given more, but the one who does not have even what he has will be taken from him. And these enemies of mine who are unwilling for me to rule over them, bring them here and slay them in front of me. I think he's talking about the unbelieving Jews who still rejected at the very last moment. Maybe those who took part in all of their skullduggery to have him, slain on the tree. Who knows? But that's a connection there too.
And I think it just occurred to me while you were saying that about, I wonder if some of that has to do with the people that talk but don't do, people that, I have faith, but yet they don't really do anything, they don't have any type of works to go with it or to show that they even have faith. So I wonder if how many of these people are going to be like, yes, I'll pray for you, or, you don't have, I'll pray for you, or whatever, but then they don't really do anything to help them or relieve their hurt or whatever it may be. I wonder if that's, because I think that faith should really be translated trusting faithfulness in our Bibles instead of just the word faith, because it implies, brother, you're the Hebrew expert, but it's an action word, right? It implies doing something. It doesn't just mean sit there and believe something, not do anything. It implies working out, or you're not even really showing, because I don't like that, showing our faith by our works. I think our faith is our works. And you only do works in faith if you believe it in the first place or you trust in it. So I think that you really can't have faith without works. And I think that's what Yaakov was explaining. And I think that's how Paul is misunderstood. I think when people, it drives me nuts when people read Ephesians 2:8-9, and they read, in fact, I'll read it right now, but they say, for by grace, actually, I have a different version here, so I'm going to read this version, but you'll see what I'm talking about. You probably already know, but it says, for by grace you have been saved through faith, in this, not of yourself. It is the gift of God, not of works, so that no one may boast. And then they stop reading. It's like, dude, read the next verse. For we are his workmanship, created in Messiah Yahshua for good works, which God, Elohim, prepared beforehand so that we would walk in them. So you just have to ask a simple question. What are those works? What's he talking about? The only works that Yahweh has created for us beforehand and said we should walk in is his Torah. So when Paul talks about created for good works, good works we know are serving the Torah and faith. That's what good works are. That's what John says they are, which God prepared for it, that we should walk in them. So I think that it's wrong when some people, especially Christians, will read Ephesians 2:8-9 and then not read verse 10 and say, see, Paul says it's all by faith, you don't have to do works. Well, if you read the next verse, what are you going to do with that verse when it says that we are created to do good works, which Yahweh before ordained for us, that we should walk in them? What in the world could he there's only one thing he could be talking about, and that's the Torah, right? Do you guys agree with that, or am I missing something there?
That's a good idea. I never really thought of it that way. I always just put it together like, you should be doing something for the master in a very simplistic fashion in my thinking, but that is an interesting connection. But I appreciate you bringing that out, because that very well may be. Because even, let's say if you're even doing the fourth commandment, you're still a witness to the world. You're going against the grain. You're witnessing the Elohim of Noah and Adam when he established the Sabbath, just an example off the top of my head, just one commandment, just by doing those things, that's very interesting. I appreciate that.
You're welcome, brother. That's always, even when I was a Baptist and used to go out and door knock and share the gospel with people, I would never use Ephesians 2:8-9, or I would, but hardly ever, because of that reason, because I just could never get past verse 10. So if I'm trying to preach a gospel based completely on grace and not having to do anything, I always went to Romans and, did the Romans road or something. So yeah, to me that's very interesting, and also it's very clear. If you could read verse 10 and say it means something other than Torah observance, I would have to be explained what exactly is he talking about then. If it's not good works which Yahweh before ordained, if it's not the Torah, then what is it? Well, what do you think, brothers? It's about 9. It was interesting.
Yeah, just,
Yeah, we had a good discussion.
Talking about the God of Noah, you're real quick in Luke, where Yahshua tells us kind of about the end times. And as it will be in the days of Noah, so it shall be in those days, the Son of Man. They did eat, they drank, they married wives. They were given in marriage until that day that Noah entered into the ark, and the flood came and destroyed them all. I just don't see a picture of a whole lot of people ever making it.
Yeah, well, there is a parallel idea there in the New Testament, or Renewed Covenant Scriptures. It says that many shall be called, but few shall be chosen. There's that kind of idea. But those that the Father has in his hand, conversely, Messiah talked about that not even one kernel will be dropped from the hand. In other words, it's not even a soul that's been put in the hand of the Master will be lost. So I guess he's the ultimate one who knows who's
that
his.
has to do of his doing too. It doesn't have to do with our doing.
Right.
But that gets real close to the once saved, always saved doctrine if you don't. Because I think that about the hand, I think is his doing, and none will be lost on his account, not based on his doing. But I certainly have the belief that anybody could walk away at any point in time, or we wouldn't necessarily have free will.
I agree with that. No, absolutely. I agree with that. I think that people can walk away at any time. If you just say, I reject it, it's not for me, I don't want it, and walk away, I think that we are cast off. Absolutely, we are. I don't believe in once saved, don't always saved.
When people talk about like the what is it, the 12 spies that were 12 spies that were sent, and then Yehoshua and Caleb being the only two with a set apart spirit, but all of the elders of Israel were in the group that didn't get into the land. The 70 that had the spirit of Moshe didn't get in. Like they had what Moshe had, and they didn't get into the land. Like, 2 of them got into the land from there. So when I look at pictures in scripture, that's what I see foretold about what's coming.
You think that's an example of the narrow road compared to the wide road? And is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's going to be a lot. It's not going to be a lot of people. And there's so many things that so many people that I do on a daily basis that I don't change my ways. I mean, I'm on a newer smartphone. I get a new smartphone every 2 or 3 years that's loaded with a lithium battery that's probably, horribly mined out of some child's, the clothing I buy from China. Like I'm not gonna have to answer for that. I'm gonna answer for that stuff. Like I'm gonna have to answer for that. This laptop computer, it's got a lithium ion battery, like everything. And I know what it is and I know what's connected to, and I choose to do it on a daily basis. Like I think that there's all kinds of things that especially Americans do that just by being an American is going to make it such a difficult road.
I don't disagree, brother. I do not disagree with you. I agree. I think that I know a lot of people believe that America is good. I do not. I mean, I believe that, yes, we have done some good things. We've given money and helped people and that. But you know what? We're not a good nation. Anybody that, and I'll just say the controversial, but anybody that allows the murder of their unborn, which especially those of us that have read Jubilees, Enoch, when it tells us exactly where that whole thing came from the very get-go, and we are and same-sex, just the stuff that we all know about. But not only that, it's just the little things too, the usury, the subjugation, just the outright lies, not telling us truthful things when it comes to everything, history. It's all just, I don't see, as a matter of fact, I believe there are interpretations of both Daniel and Revelation that for those people that believe that they're speaking of the end of days world powers, they see America in Revelation as the second beast, as the one that's like a lamb that rises up from the land, and I don't think that's a necessarily improper interpretation. In my opinion, anyways, I can very easily see that interpretation because, like Yahshua said, the only thing you have to do to judge somebody is see their fruits. So what's the fruits of the nation? No Torah observance. We do have flaws that based on Christian, and who knows if the original fathers that formed this country had good intentions, or if it was, a lot of people, and persecuting openly believers. Yeah, absolutely. But, they had, Jewish people fleeing. So that's why the whole point of the Mayflower and all that. Is that true? I didn't learn that in school, but I've learned it since. So, to me, America is not a good nation. I believe America is probably the ultimate wolf in sheep's clothing. I really believe that.
Love the land. Like, I love the land. Like, I've never lived anywhere else or even hardly been outside the land, but I'm glad that I'm not a citizen here either. So it's, we kind of live our lives trying to be separate and, citizens of Israel, not the United States, but it makes, life very comfortable, even for lower class people. And that's a very dangerous place to be.
I agree with you. I think that, I am not in disagreement. Brother Finney and Sister Ann, we actually started at 8 tonight. We were talking about it on chat. I don't know if you guys maybe didn't see it or something. So I kind of feel bad because you guys, I figure you guys probably figured we were going to do it that night. But do you guys have anything you want to add before we shut down? Or
it was a good talk. Thank you.
Yeah, it was. Thank you, brother. Yeah, you had a lot of good stuff. I always enjoy these sessions because I would rather do, go to my video on it. I would rather do these where we can sit back and just talk about things, because I've never had this before. I mean, some of this stuff I could have never talked to with my pastor in my Baptist church about. He's the man we had to tell, man. So I think it's awesome. Really good.
Yeah, it was really good. Absolutely.
All right. Well, I guess I'm going to go ahead and shut this down. We did actually remember to record it tonight. So Jackson said that if we felt it was an appropriate topic that we could actually post onto our Yahad site, because sometimes we talk about things that probably would be best off if we didn't post. It is.
It's not an easy topic to discuss either.
No, it's sure. So I'm sure he'll upload it here after he edits it. So
yeah, it's good. It was a good talk.
Thank you guys very much, and I hope that you guys have a wonderful rest of your week. And we will see you guys all on Shabbat.
Absolutely. Shalom, shalom.
Shalom, guys.
Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. For through faith the worlds were formed by you. That is something we all cannot do. But by grace you give to men new hearts. Oh, and make us to do a little part. I wanna walk like Enoch walked. I wanna be a man of faith. I wanna walk like Enoch walked and listen to all that you say. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Oh, we are strangers in this pilgrim land, whether for a few years or 100. But by faith we see your promises. Oh, just like Abel, Abraham, Moses. I wanna walk like Enoch walked. I wanna be a man of faith. I wanna walk like Enoch walked and listen to all
Jackson Snyder Presents is sponsored by Vero Essene Yahad, a biblical literature think tank headquartered in Vero Beach, Florida. Vero Yahad provides new translations, online seminars, rare books and research work connected with the Zadokite movement, the Dead Sea Scrolls, and the New Testament. Free lectures, lecture recordings, and literature are posted at www.veroyahad.org. That's VEROYAHAD.org. Contact me, your host, Jackson Snyder, by email at veroyahad@gmail.com or catch us all on Facebook.